In a series of decisive and overwhelming maritime engagements that have fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Middle East, the United States Navy has effectively neutralized the Islamic Republic of Iran's naval capabilities, a strategic shift that officials are describing as a permanent relocation of the Iranian fleet to the seafloor. The scale of the devastation is nearly total, with American commanders reporting that they have essentially decided to share the ocean with Iran by ceding them the bottom half. A grim assessment of the wreckage that now litters the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. As of this hour, more than 120 Iranian Navy ships have been confirmed damaged or sunk, with battle damage assessments still pending for scores of other vessels caught in the crosshairs of the most advanced naval strike force ever assembled. The Iranian surface fleet, once a primary tool of regional intimidation and a constant threat to international shipping lanes, is no longer considered a factor in regional security. Military analysts confirm that the once vaunted Iranian submarine force, which previously boasted a fleet of 11 operational vessels, has been entirely eradicated. The underwater threat that for decades forced U.S. and allied planners to proceed with caution in the narrow reaches of the Strait of Hormuz has been silenced. Simultaneously, Iran's military ports have been crippled by precision strikes, rendering them useless for any remaining maritime assets that might attempt to seek refuge or conduct repairs. Despite the cessation of major surface-to-surface engagements, the operation is far from over as U.S. forces continue to hunt and kill mine storage facilities and naval ammunition depots scattered along the Iranian coastline. The relentless pressure from the air and sea continues to target afloat assets, including more than 120 vessels and 44 specialized mine layers, with the stated objective of destroying the entirety of the Iranian naval fleet until no combat-effective units remain. This massive campaign of maritime dominance was orchestrated through the coordinated deployment of 2 United States carrier strike groups already strategically positioned in the region to respond to escalating tensions. The USS Abraham Lincoln, with its full complement of escort destroyers and support vessels, was operating with lethal precision in the Arabian Sea, while the world's most advanced aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, was stationed in the Red Sea. These positions provided the United States with the most advantageous tactical locations for a simultaneous, multi-vector strike on the Iranian fleet, effectively trapping Iranian assets between 2 massive hammers. The geographic distribution of these forces meant that Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from the escort ships could reach any point where Iranian vessels were operating, providing a 360-degree envelope of fire that the Iranian military proved unable to penetrate or evade. As the order for engagement was transmitted, both carrier groups were brought to full combat readiness, a state of high alert efficiency that turned the flight decks into hives of orchestrated activity. Each carrier air wing carried approximately 44 F/A-18 Super Hornets, the undisputed backbone of U.S. carrier aviation and the primary workhorses tasked with executing the strikes against enemy ships. These aircraft were charged not only with the destruction of the Iranian fleet, but also with the systematic dismantling of Iranian ammunition depots and the interception of incoming Shahed loitering munitions launched by Iranian coastal defenses. With roughly 88 Super Hornets distributed across both carriers, supplemented by the stealth capabilities of additional F-35C Lightning II fighters, the air superiority established over the region was absolute. On the flight decks of both the Lincoln and the Ford, the scene was one of intense, high-stakes preparation, as fighters were brought up from the hangar bays and positioned for launch with rhythmic precision. The roar of the engines was deafening as the steam and electromagnetic catapults fired, launching the heavily armed fighters off the bow one after another in rapid succession. The jets climbed hard, banking sharply toward their assigned targets across the horizon. The tempo was relentless. One jet would scream off the deck, and before the spray from the launch had even settled, the next was already rolling into position on the catapult. Once in the air, the pilots operated with cold, calculated efficiency. Utilizing advanced targeting pods, pilots identified Iranian warships on the horizon with crystal clarity. Upon locking on and selecting the appropriate precision-guided weapon, the fire was instantaneous. Reports from the cockpit described the devastating impact as missiles struck their targets with catastrophic results, yet the pilots remained focused on the broader mission. There were no victory laps. A pilot would not circle back to observe the sinking of a target, but would instead immediately bank toward the next set of coordinates to engage another Iranian destroyer or patrol craft. The mission objective was clear: work through the entire target list as fast as possible, striking one vessel after another to prevent the Iranians from dispersing their forces or taking cover in the relative safety of their heavily fortified ports. While the skies were filled with Super Hornets, the surface of the sea was dominated by the lethal capabilities of the escort destroyers. On the bridges of these Arleigh Burke-class ships, the order to engage with Tomahawk cruise missiles was received with solemn professionalism. The command was acknowledged and passed instantly to the weapons teams below deck. Within seconds, the vertical launch cell hatches erupted open, and the missiles began their ascent. One after another, the Tomahawks surged from their cells in blinding bursts of flame and white smoke, arcing high into the sky before leveling off and racing at subsonic speeds toward Iranian naval vessels and shore-based targets. Each missile, programmed with the precise GPS coordinates of its intended victim, acted as a long-range surgical tool of destruction. The barrage continued unabated until the fire mission was complete, leaving a trail of smoke across the horizon that signaled the end of Iranian maritime resistance. Even as the strikes were being carried out, the massive logistical and maintenance tail of the carrier strike groups worked in overdrive to sustain the operational tempo. Below deck, in the cavernous hangar levels of the carriers, teams of dedicated mechanics were already working on the fighters that had returned from their initial sorties. Aircraft were brought down from the flight deck on massive elevators, where maintenance teams swarmed each jet like a well-drilled pit crew. Every landing gear strut was inspected and lubricated, and the complex missile rail mechanisms and bomb release assemblies were greased and tested to ensure they would function flawlessly on the next sortie. Hydraulic lines were checked for leaks, and engine panels were swung open for lightning-fast inspections by senior technicians. Anything flagged by the pilot during the mission, be it a warning light, a sluggish control response, or a minor avionics glitch, was diagnosed and repaired on the spot, often while the aircraft was being refueled. The goal was simple: keep the maximum number of airframes in the air at all times. On the flight deck, the arresting gear crew prepared for the constant influx of returning aircraft. They meticulously inspected the thick steel cables stretched across the deck, the vital wires that catch the tailhook of an incoming fighter and bring a multi-ton aircraft to a dead stop in less than 300 feet. As fighters returning from combat approached the carrier from the stern, they dropped their tailhooks and followed the glide slope guided by the carrier's optical landing system. Inside the bridge, the air traffic control team logged every landing with granular detail, recording the exact time of arrival, the pilot's name, the aircraft number, the amount of weapons expended, the remaining fuel, and any maintenance issues reported in flight. Every piece of data was recorded and fed back into the next planning cycle to ensure the strike group's efficiency remained at peak levels. In the aft section of the flight deck, the logistical heartbeat of the fleet continued with the preparation of Sikorsky MH-60R Seahawk helicopters for critical resupply missions. A logistics ship had arrived in the vicinity, loaded with the massive amounts of provisions, fuel, and ordnance required to sustain a fleet at war. The Seahawks acted as a bridge, shuttling everything from the supply vessel to the carrier and its escorts. Crates of food, drinking water, medical supplies, and spare parts, along with heavy boxes of ammunition and missile components, were rigged with cargo nets and slung beneath the helicopters. The Seahawks lifted off, flew the short distance to the supply ship, and ferried the loads back in a constant rotation. This vertical replenishment ensured that the flow of material remained constant, allowing every ship in the strike group to sustain high-intensity operations without the need to slow down or retreat from the combat zone. The cycle on the carrier was an endless loop of power and preparation. On the bow, catapults launched fighters into the sky. On the stern, returning jets caught the wire and rolled to a halt. Below deck, mechanics turned aircraft around as fast as humanly possible, while on the flight deck, weapons crews loaded fresh ordnance onto the wings of the waiting Super Hornets. In the hangars, the elevators were in constant motion, moving jets between levels. High above the water, groups of F/A-18 Super Hornets formed up in tactical formations, flying together toward the Iranian coast before splitting apart as they neared their objectives. Each pilot broke off toward his own assigned target, executing his strike with precision and immediately turning back toward the carrier to rearm and go again. This operation ran day and night, sortie after sortie, a relentless machine of naval warfare that did not stop until the Iranian fleet ceased to exist as a viable fighting force. The consequences of this campaign are profound and far-reaching. By removing the Iranian Navy from the board, the United States has not only secured the vital energy corridors of the world, but has also sent a definitive message regarding the cost of maritime aggression. The Iranian Naval Command now finds itself a navy in name only, with its assets either resting on the ocean floor or reduced to smoldering ruins in crippled ports. The bottom half of the ocean is now the permanent home of a fleet that once sought to challenge the freedom of navigation. As U.S. forces continue to monitor the region and neutralize any remaining pockets of resistance, the sheer scale of the operation stands as a testament to the integrated power of modern carrier strike groups. The Iranian naval threat has been systematically dismantled, piece by piece, vessel by vessel, until nothing was left but the silence of the deep sea. The pressure remains constant, the hunt continues for any remaining depots or hidden assets, and the message from the U.S. Navy is clear. The era of Iranian naval interference has come to a violent and comprehensive end.